Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Tree Actions, the Human Forestry Podcast. And joining us from Middle Earth, Ontario, this episode is Matt Logan. What buckthorn is that? Would that be the closest accurate?
It's still buckhorn.
Buckhorn, sorry.
Buckhorn, yeah. We're not named after an invasive plant, but
right, buckhorn. Matt Logan, welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you very much, Dwayne.
And joining us as always, or with me as always, this is a partnership venture, is my trusted partner, Tony Tresselt.
Morning, Tony. Good morning, everyone.
And I'd just like to wish everyone a happy St. Patrick's Day. This is actually St. Patrick's Day. Now, when you're listening to this, when it airs, it won't be St. Patrick's Day anymore, but we did, in fact, record this on St. Patrick's Day. And Tony, I can see you're sporting something green. I went.
It wasn't by design. It was just simply this was the buff that was on top, and I just took a shower. So anyway.
Just flew.
Yeah, okay. It just happened that way. I'm not Irish.
Well, Matt does have
it's great when your wardrobe consists of a massive amount of buffs, and you're like, which buff day is it? What buff day do you?
More importantly, you have to find a way to limit your buffs. So I only have buffs from companies that I personally know, right? I do keep a couple of like the trade show buffs around, just like the same reason, like you keep an old bandana when you go hiking. If you run out of toilet paper, I mean, you don't want to use a good bandana or have to cut half your sock off. So I keep a couple of those around for the dirty work, but I don't. The buffs I generally use are either from companies I know, or my brother Mark works for the BLM, which is Bureau of Land Management. He got me a really cool Smokey the Bear buff, which is pretty cool. So that one's good. But other than that, they're all from companies I know.
Yeah, it's always a tough explanation when you walk out of the woods with missing one sleeve.
Yeah,
and you didn't get in a bear fight.
Right. Yeah. It leads to some. Either you're going to have to start lying or it's going to be a really strange conversation, like, well, where'd your sleeve go? Like, yeah. so it's always good.
So I know you have your question, but this might be the time to tell you about possibly my greatest contribution to arboriculture. Which is
I do know this. Oh yeah.
The arbor mullet is so you take a buff and then you cut up the sides.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the top, then you put it on your head and you flip the front and then you have double the moisture absorption in the front.
Yeah.
And then the back drapes down and protects your neck from the sun.
Right.
So it keeps you from getting a burnt neck.
Yeah.
And then in the winter, you pull it all the way down and it's a little dicky.
Mm-hmm.
Arbor mullet. Go forth.
A little dicky. Well, I resemble that comment.
So just to be clear, you only cut halfway up the sides of the buff.
Halfway you go halfway. Usually there's like a fold seam.
Yeah.
Right.
And you just cut up those, and then it just gets you flip there, and then you got extra sweat absorption there.
Mm, yeah.
And the
arbor mullet works pretty good.
Cover. And a sun cover, because I've heard sunscreens actually, they're saying more and more that it's quite toxic to us. It gets in your bloodstream and it can be quite bad. So yeah, but wearing an arbor mullet
your neck works perfect.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And if you actually have a mullet, your buff will match your hairstyle, which is important if you're accessorizing on the job site. And you want to look good, look good, feel good.
Down.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I always have the buff on anyway, because it's just my hair is insane. So.
Right. Well, this has already been a unique session of Tree Actions, which I would expect nothing less. So that's great.
Exactly.
And on with the question. Matt, if you could just think back for a moment and share with us the first time that you remember feeling a connection to a tree or trees.
So I got two.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Because I knew this was the question, right? So
yeah, it's okay.
Like I was going to be surprised. Where I grew up, I had a really awesome childhood. My parents, they owned a place right on the river, and then to the back of the property there was a big forest. So you just like run around the forest all day, and that's was my childhood. Um, and I remember, generations of kids had played in these forests and everything. So there was forts, and then when you got to a certain age, you took over that fort, and it was just kind of successional.
Yeah, yeah,
And I remember Kevin, who was a kid down the road. He and I, we climbed up this tree, and it was winter. We climbed up a tree into like it might have been a deer stand. I don't know. But we got up there, and it was great. And then we decided to jump off, and in now is probably about 12 feet, but back then it was probably at least 40 feet because the
yeah,
tree is retrenched. It's not my memory.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but so Kevin jumped off feet first. He jumped off, and he landed fine, and it was no problem. I was a little more hesitant, so I like scooched on my bum to the end of the ledge, and I kind of decided to hop off, and there was a single nail uh, still in the fort that caught my snow pants, and it did the perfect pivot that I went rotated directly enough that the nail let go when my face was directly pointing down. So it was less of a connection with the tree. It was more of a connection with the ground.
Hmm.
But it was, I remember that concussion and all, but like that was a point I remember.
It was.
Um,
It sounds like it was your first experience with a rescue.
there was no rescue. Kevin thought he was going to get in trouble, so he ran home. And I was just left in the woods.
Man, that's
Um,
a good idea. That when something happens, right? Just everybody. If anything happens, just everybody run.
Nobody knows nothing. Yeah. Um, and then the other one is my grandfather lived in Oshawa. Well, my grandma and grandpa lived in Oshawa, and he took immaculate care of his property. And he had this silver maple in his backyard, which was about, like, I don't know, 2 feet across kind of thing, and 12 feet tall. And so he would have Carlo come over every 2 years. And like my grandfather was the biggest man I ever met, but he hardly reached 5'8". And I think he was just jealous of the height of this tree. And so every 2 years, just like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I remember climbing that tree when it would sucker up. I'd climb it, and I still got a picture of when my grandma and grandpa passed. We were, you go through the photos and everything, and they had a picture of me um, in that tree.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I showed it to my son, um, and he thought it was him because we look very similar. He's like, I don't
Right.
remember wearing shorts like that. I'm like, well, it was the 80s. It wasn't you. Don't worry. We won't let you do that. Uh, yeah. So
Yeah.
those are two of the trees that I kind of remember the most. But like that forest in the back of the property, like that, I spent all my time back there.
Yeah. It's interesting. People that have, well, I was going to say people that have access to, but even like whether it's in their yard or not, if there's a tree or green patch somewhere, many of our guests go back to that. Like they spent a lot of time in the woods, in the forest, in the trees, by a river, but it was always, and like hours, like gone, like many of our guests have talked about that. It's a common thing. I wonder if it's, I doubt it's unique to arborists, but certainly seems to be a common trend. I think, kids in general, I find it interesting that we're drawn to the natural settings.
Yeah, I wonder, if you kind of reverse engineer that, like even okay, so a bunch of arborists spent time outside, but are the arborists because they were outside, or the fact that
Yeah.
they like being in the woods for hours by themselves and stuff like that? Like, what is that connection? Because I I loved just being by myself in the forest, finding new things and everything like that. And it's funny because now, um, my wife and I, we own 25 acres of forest, and it's constantly tracing. I like dragging the kids outside and like, the stream's running, or you know whatever's happening in the woods.
Yeah.
We're dragging them, and they're like, "You don't want to." I'm like, enjoy it.
Interesting. Yeah. It's like the cat experiment, Tony. We don't we could interview all people from all walks, and many of them as children may have been drawn to green spaces in our parks. I don't know. We just end up, all we're talking to is arborists pretty much.
Yeah, so obviously we're going to see some themes, right?
Yeah, and it's not by no means scientific.
Right.
What was that called?
Yeah, but it would be amazing if you got somebody on here and they're like, "Yeah, I hate nature."
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, for a long time, like I wasn't an arborist because I love trees. I was an arborist because I hated them. I just wanted to cut them all down because that's all I did was removals, right? Like one time in my youth, I decided to be a vegetarian, not because I love animals. I just hate vegetables. I want to eat them all.
Your dad's maple tree, or sorry, your grandpa's maple tree, Matt. What an interesting lesson in. I guess would you call it a pollard, or would you call it a shear?
I'd call it a top.
Okay.
It was topping for sure. It was funny because like he was still alive when I started getting into horticulture and landscape, and then I was just transitioning into arboriculture, and so I'd go and see him. I'm like, and by this time Carla was too old to trim the tree, and my granddad was too, so he was asking me to do it, and I was trying to educate him on proper pruning of trees and the you know the downside of topping, and trying to
Yeah.
talk to him about coding, like somebody who
Yeah.
just got brand new information, so they have
Yeah.
to like vomit it on somebody
Yep.
else immediately, and he wasn't taking much
Well,
of it.
I'm curious. Did he? Did
Yeah,
but did yeah?
just
So they
making
cut
sure.
it lower, like they went below the cuts every time and just whopped it.
They would take it down to about 8, 9 inch stubs,
So,
and
but like they didn't leave
yeah, it
knuckles. They
was
didn't leave. There was
it,
wow, that tree tolerated that for quite a while. Then it's fascinating.
it was incredible because even my granddad would use it as a brag because I'd be talking about how terrible it is and you're killing the tree and all this stuff, and everyone's like, it's still there.
Yeah. Well, you get that. Then
Yeah,
there are
you know,
species that will tolerate it. It's the one thing that makes that argument sometimes mute or frustrating, right? Because there are customers like, well, I've been doing that for years. Things have been fine. Grows like hell.
yeah. Well, that tree
Mhm.
topping is bad T-shirt. Like I got that when I was over in
Uh-huh.
Copenhagen, and it was like my favorite shirt to wear. So I was wearing it at a Landscape Ontario conference, and I was having a chat with a guy, and he looks at my shirt. He's like, "Did you know actually trees do very well topping? Did you know that?" I'm like, "I didn't know that," and I'm pretty sure I know more about trees than you do. So um, it's not that they're doing well; it's just that they're doing
You could
poorly, really,
totally
really slowly.
rejuvenate them.
it, it, it was one of those moments where you're just watching like the
Yeah.
tumbleweed go across the room. You're like, okay, are we gonna
Well,
keep going with
it
this?
I was,
And
I've often wondered
yeah,
to myself what would have happened if by some strange circumstance, you know, and it really would have just been, I think, happenstance if I would have gotten, you know, because I if I get inspired by someone, I think they're cool or whatever. I like what they say or do. I like their work ethic or whatever. Maybe I liked drinking with them back in the day, like whatever it was. But if I got, I've met, you get to know these guys that are toppers, or, and there's some parts of what they do that they're good at, and they got strong personalities, and if I got to be friends with one of them somehow, or I knew one and ended up, hey, I need someone to drag brush. Next thing I know, hey, you can climb, and I'm a treetop and mofo. Like if that happened to me, I'd be proud of it and think, well, no, I don't understand. Look at this thing. If I had been educated that way, it would have taken a lot to convert me. I wonder about that. Like could I have become a zealot of that, and just said, all those certified arborists, blah, blah, so and so's, because they keep getting growing or popping up, right? and I don't think they're necessarily bad people. They've just been misinformed, right?
but I think there's several different mentalities that kind of drive the people that are in this industry, and for myself, I would even say
Hmm.
it's transitioned where there is this in you used to have a slide, um, and it was a quote from an old book that talked about people who climb trees or something, and it's basically, um, it takes a certain mentality of person thinking that they can, um, wrangle
Right.
or subdue nature, and there's like this internal drive to dominate, and I think that definitely is, especially with finding
Yeah.
young males, of a certain age with an
Yeah.
underdeveloped frontal lobe. That that's what gets them in the industry. Is there like I'm going to conquer this? I'm going to conquer this physically. I am going to do what other people can't do. Um, I'm
Yeah.
gonna, you know, I'm gonna hunt
Yeah.
a unicorn, kind of thing, because I can. And then there really does, hopefully, at least in my case, I'd say I did start kind of thinking about a bit of a longer game as far as how can I protect these, and how can I also care for my clients. Um, but I guess maybe it goes back to
Right.
the
Yeah.
oak and the
Yeah.
uke too. Is
Yeah.
some of that mentality too, right? And I think a lot of conversations go back to the oak and the uke, and like there's really good guys that I know, and they're just like, I love ripping down a tree, and I do too. Like if
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
necessary removal and it's big and
Yeah.
it's technical and it's, you got to think inside of the box and outside of the box and everything else in between. That stuff just
Yeah.
gets me right revved up. I love it. If I got to get a diagram put together and
Yeah.
a rigging list, I love it. But I'm not ripping, in the same token, if somebody says, this tree needs to come down because it's too big, I'm like, get somebody else.
How many
Not
times would you
interested.
say you've been successful in talking someone out of removing a tree?
Um, I'd say quite a bit. The Our business was very based on,
Hmm.
client relationships. Like we tried never to have
Right.
customers, always to have clients, and the difference there is
Right.
building trust. So, um, one of the ways I did that was I told them when they didn't need anything. If they're like, "Well, this tree looks like," no, it's
Yeah.
fine. Leave it. You're good. Try to figure out what their concerns are really, what it's really about. And, once I was able to build that trust, um, I would talk people out of work. And it's okay because they know they're going to call me.
Yeah.
I know they're going to call me the next time because they know I'm interested in the long game of building that relationship. So I've done it quite a bit, and I'm pretty proud of it. Sometimes I haven't, and I just and the crew's kind of like, why are we taking this thing down? I said, well, here's the situation. I gave them all the information, which I think that was
Right.
my job as a salesperson, is to give them all the information available so they can make
Yeah.
the best decision for them. And if we could still have that conversation, and they could justify, and I wasn't able to give them a satisfactory alternative, then it's time for it to go. It's one of the things that, people would say, oh, the tree's too close to the house. I'm afraid if it falls on the house, it's gonna kill my family. And they're looking at like a 40-foot cedar tree. I'm like, if that happens, you got the wrong little pig to build your house. You should have waited a little longer. But like if I said, what I can do is I can bring knowledge, experience, scientific backing. I can bring all this stuff to you and talk to you about it. But the big thing is if it's windy tonight and all you're thinking about is that tree, and all the information that I've given you isn't enough, you at least need to recognize that you are making a decision on an emotional level, and you're not, and that is overriding the information that I've been able to try to give you. And if that emotion is still there, that's very hard to, you can't deny it. So as long as they're aware of those things and they make that decision, that's fine. But even in cases, there's been cases we've gone through all that, and I still say, I get it, but we're not doing it.
Yeah. You mentioned the word trust, and I think it's like I recall having clients back in the early days when I started. I did start a couple tree services, believe it or not, way back in the day, and I had, I guess they were, you would call them clients, not customers, but where you got to the point, because exactly what you said, you just say, no, this is fine, that's fine, you don't need this. But then if a storm came or something happened, there was several customers that I literally could go into the yard, and I would, you drive by, you notice something, you noticed a branch got torn or whatever. You might notice an infestation of aphids or whatever. I didn't even have to ask to do anything. Then I would just invoice for whatever I did, and there was never a question. And they said, like, if you see anything ever, just go ahead. But that was after some time period where they learned, like, you're just going to do what needs to get done, and they want you to do what needs to get done. They don't want to have to wait and call you if you can see. And that, but I think, yeah, trust is, and I think honesty ties in with that. And then they believe you, and that your honesty is understood and clear.
I think we have several clients that it's just, what do you think, Matt? Whatever you think, just think of it as your own property. And that's what we do. And yeah, that trust is absolutely, it's massive. And that's, that's something that Phil Pavey always said, is you take care of your clients and they will take care of you.
Well, and it's also fun or rewarding. I don't know if maybe those two words could be mixed, but there's a sense of pride and accomplishment, when you have people, and they're not, you're not on a, you don't see them regularly. You're not part of their social circle necessarily. You're not, you're not going to parties. You might in some cases, maybe the odd Christmas gathering, potentially, whatever, but they're not quite friends. They're not quite acquaintances, but yet the trust is there. And that having a list of people like that.
Yeah.
And, I think it really creates a sense of community, and, you're where you are, it's smaller, right? Like Buckhorn is not heck, the town itself is small, but it's the people around the area. It's the region you form that relationship with. Right. And you start getting involved in where, I think a lot of us do, but like in associations or the Better Business Bureau or community groups and functions, and that all ties together, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. You're once you get that trust in that,
Hmm.
it's more of a partnership that you're both kind of, you have a goal for what you want this property to be. Um, and it's usually safe, healthy, um, and a plan for it. And then you're just meeting up and saying, "Hey, how are we doing on our plan?" And um, and then yeah, you do with that type of mentality and that kind of focus. Yeah, you do start seeing them at different associations around here. We have a lot of our
Hmm.
clientele are cottagers, so it's very seasonal. So there's different seasonal events, there's different organizations, things like that. That you're somewhat actively trying to be there, but it's also like that's the stuff that interests you
Yep.
too. Um, we do we, we have one cottager, um, and his whole island's been going through this heavy
Mm.
decline of pine trees, and we've had the ministry come out and take a look at it. But it's basically what I call accumulated stress. It's just years and years of drought, heat waves, stuff like that, and we've had a relationship for with him for probably a dozen years or so. And I was at his cottage, and and he kind of looks at me like, Matt, I love seeing you, but I
Right.
hate when you have to come here because it's always like trees that have died because it's drought
Yeah.
and all this stuff. So he we have this great relationship, but he hates the fact that we have it sometimes. 'Cause he calls me, he's like, "Oh, I
Sort
gotta
of
have
like a
you come out
fireman.
again." But like we with that, we've set up like sprinkler systems on his island.
You're kind of like a fireman. You know, everyone's really happy to see you, but the circumstances aren't the greatest.
Yeah.
They always said that was the biggest difference between a police officer and a firefighter is that no one's ever happy to see the police officer. They might be happy you're there, but they're not. Someone's not happy. Whereas a firefighter, everybody's happy.
Yeah.
um, yeah, you just got me thinking there. It's one of the cool things about residential arboriculture. Like being part of certainly, well, any tree service that is, in a community where, whether it be the manager or the owner of a small company or the manager that of a bigger company that, but forms those relationships or sees the value in it, right? And then I think at some point, if you're lucky enough as an arborist working on a crew, whether it be starting to stuff a chipper and finally make your way to a climber or a bucket guy, like to recognize that and to appreciate that, and for the value that it is, where how that maybe it's the prefrontal lobe making that maturity change or something, but that's a real neat thing that uh, is unique to this industry or this profession or this trade, if you want to call it that. Like, I wonder if plumbers feel that way about going back to fixing a pipe or unplugging a drain. I don't know if they get the same, like Tony, you've talked about this, the experience of, having been in your brother's business for a long time now, well, your whole career, going back to trees, and they're this, it's been cared for. I don't know, are there any that your dad actually cared for? It goes back that far.
Yeah, there's some because my father worked with us as an arborist rep or sales rep for a while when my brother first started. So there's some of his original clients and things, and then yeah, I think it's different because there's a different like emotional value that's put onto a tree or a landscape sometimes because it's
Yeah.
something that's growing and changes. Like you grow and change, like your children grow and change. Like nobody puts in a toilet and like that's my grandfather's memorial toilet. Like but they do plant it. Well, I guess some families.
He did some of his best thinking on that toilet.
Exactly right. Okay, maybe a
Thinking or
toilet, but
thinking.
but they definitely don't put in like the memorial sink trap. Like nobody does this, right? Like and then every time I climb under there to unclog it, I think of old granddad. But they do that with trees, right? So I think there's that is a difference too, right? Like I think the fact that it's growing gives it its own value, the fact that it changes. And I think that's where a lot of the satisfaction comes from in working on them is like, I mean, I think to take another example is like when I write a book, right? Like I put the book out. Once the book's gone, I'm kind of done with it, right? Like it doesn't, that book is kind of finished and I move on because it's just this thing that stays. Or if you create like a, you know, like a something artistic, you make a cool jewelry box or something, like you don't necessarily, as an artist, I don't necessarily go back to it. I just move on to the next one. Whereas an arborist, you do go back to it. Like you do repeat on that same, now it's of course never the same tree, because, you know, they're growing and living, but it is interesting that way. And I think that we put more, there's more value to it because it's a living thing, because it grows and changes. I mean, if you really want to get deep about it, maybe there's a parallel. We see the change in ourselves when the change in the tree serves as a time marker, right? I remember when that tree was 2 inches big, you know, and my daughter was 3 feet tall, you know, now it's much bigger and she's grown and on her own.
You know, that, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think there's an issue because sometimes there's a dichotomy in what the value is, depending on who you are. Because like you may find that tree to have, as an arborist or as, you know, the person looking at the tree or whatever, you may find that value more than even the client sees that value. And maybe that tree that you want to be involved in that's development, the client doesn't care and they're gonna take the next price, you know, they're gonna take the next person. And so it's a little difficult because there's value there, but whose ownership is it? And there's different appreciation for trees. You know, we're in a very wooded area and we're in a landscape that, you know, was developed due to harvesting trees, right? That's what got people up here in the first place. So I don't think currently there's enough value placed on trees in this particular area now, which is kind of odd because a lot of our clients are from more populated areas, Toronto and stuff like that, and then they come up here to cottage country, and some of those values don't get brought up, or maybe they bring those values up, but the people, the contractors, the locals don't share those values with them. So it's kind of, there's kind of a warring.
Well, you know, I think it comes down to what you were talking about in the beginning. You know, you find those people that have, you know, that trust you, that believe you, and that also share the values. You know, because when you're talking to people about trees like you do, and saying, well, your tree is fine the way it is, it doesn't need anything. You know, you're also, you know, you're giving you know, it's implied that you care about the tree, you know, pretty obviously, right? And if someone appreciates that, then obviously you share something in common, and it's the tree's the common connection, right? And it's the care of the tree and what's best for the tree. And then you cultivate a group of people around you like that, which end up being your clients. I think that, and then the ones that say, well, I don't give a shit, I just want you, if you aren't going to do it, I'm telling you, then you can get out of here. And it's like, no problem, see ya. Right. And
it's like I have people that they're like, there's, you know, my grass isn't growing. I'm like, I don't care about your grass. I don't care at all about your grass. It's like, your tree is good. If there's something we need to do for your tree or your shrubs or something like that, but grass,
the grass thing gets me. I just had it the other day with a friend, and he says, I got this, can you look at this tree? You know, it doesn't matter. Once people realize, you know, something about trees, they always have a tree. I got this tree. But they want, I'm going to cut these 3, and I'd like this one like about half the size. I'm like, okay, so like, are you worried about it? No, we just look at the grass. And I'm like, you do realize that, like, if you have ever been in the forest, and he's right borders a big open forest space. And I said, like, you don't see any grass in there, right? I said, they don't really they're not meant to be together. It's really difficult to get them both to cohabit. It's not natural.
Well, yeah, but that kind of goes into the I love trees
Yeah.
myth. It's like, oh, I love trees. I love
Yeah.
trees. But
Yeah.
an acorn dropped 4 feet away from my car. So we need to
Yeah.
take down this 80-foot oak tree. And you're like, that seems a little harsh, but it's always no, I
But
love
I
trees. I love
hate
trees.
leaves. I hate leaves.
Yeah, I hate. Well, and one of the things I think there's also like I've been doing it for a little while. Not as much as you two tenured gentlemen there, but I've been doing it a while, and I've got pretty comfortable speaking to people, and just kind of being my true self, which is usually kind of sarcastic and pointed. Um, but it's when people are like, "Well, this tree's not doing anything here," and I'm like, "Oh, let's put oxygen." And they're like, "Well, why is it so close to the house?" I'm like, "Okay, well, here we have an 80-year-old maple tree, and your cottage is 10 years old. I'm not good at math, but this doesn't sound like this is the tree's fault here."
Yeah.
And fortunately, well, sometimes that works really well, and you kind of it gets us to have some rapport, and we can, okay, this is the way our conversations are going to go. And sometimes
Yeah.
um, crickets. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
no, might have to try a
Yeah.
different sales attempt
And then
here.
there's times where you just flat out, refuse. Getting back to your your grandfather's maple, I always found those are my most challenging. And and I was trained by my second real job as an arborist. The company, was older and more established, and they used to top trees. And I shouldn't say they used to; they still did, but they would only do trees that had been topped before because of the splitting and the weak parts, right? So they made the change to say we're not going to like if the tree's never been topped, we don't top it. But if it's been topped before, and especially the big cuts, we do restorative, and you can't let the limbs, particularly poplars and weak wooded trees like that, like the amount of suckers and the length that they'll get off, they always split and break off, right? And if you retop them, basically, not never down to the original cuts, but you would in essence be topping it again. But and I always like you said, coming out of school, I was relatively fresh out of school, and like, this is wrong, man. Like, what are you doing? It's like, but it was like, look, the customer didn't top it, or it was topped when this was done. Everybody was doing this. Okay. Like, it wasn't like this is pre-Shigo stuff, right? Apparently people did it. I think it was done. And now we're in this situation. So there is a reason for it. And it was explained to me that way. I still struggled with it, but I became willing to, or well, you kind of have a job, you kind of have to do what you're told a little bit, but as I grew in my career, I pondered that often. Like, what do you do? Do you just remove it and start over? Which is, Shiga would often say that. Well, just cut it down and plant something decent. It's like,
Yeah.
to me, that was euthanistic. Like, it's not the tree's fault, and it could live for many, many years. And the one other thing that really piqued me on it was the same boss. He was like, look, that old lady is going to not outlive that tree. And to cut it down after she's lost her husband 2 years ago is just something she doesn't need in her life. So we're going to do this so it will be safe and she gets her tree. And I was like, well, okay, that's another angle, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think there's like, what is it? The Littlest Prince, or the Little Prince? Prince, you're forever responsible
Yeah.
for what you've tamed. That's
Okay.
kind of the
Okay.
mentality there, right? But Like, I remember when I was training for you, and we were it was
Yeah.
Sparpole or something like that, and I kind of said, I'm like, Dwayne, we're kind of wrecking healthy trees. They were poplars, but um, you said if this training keeps someone healthy and somebody doesn't get hurt, then that is our objective. And it really depends on what is the objective. So
Mm, yeah.
you have a you have a tree that's been topped, and do you take it down, or does it have value standing up even in the state that it's in? Well, it depends on
Yeah. Yep.
who's
Yeah.
invested in it. If you're looking at long going investment, then yeah, probably taking it down and planting another one. But it's kind of considering all the different factors and all the different people that are invested uh, in the situation, right? So with that example that I use, the trees were a vehicle to get us to have
Hmm.
safer tree workers. Well, if that's our end goal, which it certainly was, then yeah,
Yeah.
we're breaking a couple eggs.
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely, cut trees down that are healthy or that wouldn't need to be get down for in the name of education, for the sake of education. That definitely happens, and there's many a year
Yeah,
that make that sacrifice. Um, yeah, but when it comes to the business of arboriculture, though, and you've made me think about it more in this podcast, is the and I always used to say this to my students when I taught at the college. you know, Arboriculture isn't just caring for trees. It's also caring for people. And it's making that blending what's best for the people with what's best for the tree as best you can. There's a, you don't like, cause if you just do what's best for the tree, ignoring the person, which, as a private tree care company, that can be quite costly, but making a blend, right? Say
but it's
again.
very common too. It's very common too, and I think especially in regards to people that get into this industry, they're not necessarily into this industry thinking that they're part of the service sector. They think they're getting into this kick-ass cool job with cool gear, and it
Yeah.
has risk and stuff like that. And it's one of the conversations that client constantly have with the crew is, what do we do? We work with trees. I'm like, no, we don't.
Right.
We work with people. We work with people in the realm of trees. Trees have not paid
Right.
me a dollar in my 25 years of being an arborist.
Right.
People have. And we take care of people in the scope of
Exactly.
trees.
And and it's like you said, it doesn't need to be removed. It's perfectly healthy. The reasoning is acorns on the vehicle once in a while. It's like, I'm sorry. I've explained to you all the options, but I don't feel comfortable cutting down this oak for that reason. I would love to make some money here, but this isn't the way I want to do it. So I respectfully would pass you on to someone that doesn't give a shit.
or they just
Yeah.
see it differently, and that's fine too.
Right. Yeah. Good
Um,
point.
and like you said earlier, that doesn't make them a
Yeah. No,
bad
that's a good
person.
point. Reserve
They just
judgment
look
on
at it
that
a
is
different
would
way.
be, I could probably use a lesson in that.
I think when I teach pruning courses now, because the topping always comes up, right? Because pollarding and this, that. And I think one key aspect that I start to put in when I talk about topping trees is really, for me, the definition of topping comes down to indiscriminate cuts. They're put there out of ignorance, ignorance that you don't know or ignorance you don't care. Whereas because you look at, I have a tree on a property rental. It was my parents' place, and it's a big silver maple. Sits right on the bank of a river, but the tree's falling apart. basically, essentially what I need to do is I'm going to retrench it, which you could define. The cuts I'll make could be defined as topping cuts, because I need the tree on the bank to keep the roots, to keep it, there's a reason for the tree, and I can keep it and it can stay there for quite a while, but it's not topping because my cuts are not going to be indiscriminate, right? It's there to reduce wind load and gravity load. Now, granted, you have to be careful from a philosophical standpoint. If you go down that road, we could justify almost anything, but with the firm backing in education and experience and skill, a top tree is indiscriminate internodal cuts, right? They're just put anywhere for no reason. Whereas a tree that could possibly say like retrenched, or could it be crown reduced or anything, even if that reasoning is like Dwayne said, is because, the person just doesn't want the tree gone, but it has to be made safe. So I think and you have to tread lightly there, but I think you can say it. And now there are cases where we've had, beautiful, 125-foot sycamore trees, with 80-foot of crown spread right next to it. Wow, this thing's so dirty. I'm like, well, that's why we keep them outside. Well, and I'm like, it's like, no, I can't justify this with the skill, knowledge, and the way I see the world. And it's like, someone else gonna have to do it, because it's not, it's like, so I think you can, by wording it carefully, I think you can start to go a long way. Because there's been times where I've made what you could define as a topping cut on a tree that had storm damage, right? Like that just Mother Nature broke it right off, and I cut that thing back to, an 8-inch cut to a 2-inch stem, but it's all that was there. It wasn't an indiscriminate cut, right? It was made for a purpose with a future goal in mind.
Yeah.
I think the purpose is important, and also understanding that the purpose and scope is understood by everyone involved. Topping, just from a structural point of view, decreases potential for failure. Just a shortened lever, right? But that's not for the tree. So if we're doing things that are not for the tree, we're doing things for the client, then okay, I guess that opens it up. It just kind of depends on if you're willing to do that. Where your reduction, to me, is kind of your middle zone. You're doing something that can be helpful to the tree, and also can help mitigate some of the concerns of the client if there is structural concerns and things like that. But I've had plenty of times where, somebody's asked something of me and I said, okay, well, what's important to you? Well, I want this tree to be happy and healthy. I'm like, well, what you just recommended, or what you want, and or what you've asked me to do and what you want are completely at loggerheads. What we're talking about is only beneficial to you, and it's actually detrimental to the tree. So if you're really concerned about the long-term health of this tree, let's try to find some solutions that kind of work with you and with the tree as well. And because the whole client is always right. Nope. Or we wouldn't be there giving them recommendations and educating them, right? Like, their needs need to be respected and understood, but we're the ones that are bringing in the information in regards to this specific topic, right? So sometimes they don't understand that, no, you can't cut this 8-inch limb off this tree because it's going to create a column of decay, and 10 years down the road with it, explaining that all to them. A lot of times I get, oh, geez, I didn't know that. But it takes that extra time to explain that stuff. And some people just aren't interested. And that's, you kind of said it before, Dwayne. And that's kind of when you're like, well, I need to decide if I'm interested now.
It really is. I think it really does come down to whether they care or not about the tree, really. Like, ultimately, like, some people view them. I find this fascinating because I guess I feel I have, when you own a property, like I somehow am able to grasp the concept of owning land, and on that land is trees, but I have I'm a little bit less owneristic of the fact that I could own the tree, but I guess it's on my land, so therefore I own it. But then, like, if deer is living on my land, I don't think that I own the deer, and I don't think that I own the birds. Uh, I guess I might own the mushrooms and the fungi, I suppose. But like, it's interesting how, for me, at least in my mind, I've been observing these segregations, right? Like I have deer that basically live here, but I don't think I own them. And there's even laws that protect them anyway, right? Like there's yet trees are, I don't know why trees don't get that same thought or mentality, because so often they're treated as owned. Like there's an ownership thing, and I do what I want. It's my thing, you know. If I want to paint my shed blue, I want to paint it blue. I want to top my tree, I want to top my tree. Like I don't care. They don't look at it as living, and that's where I guess I don't view land as alive in the way that I view a tree as alive, which is kind of silly when I think about it.
Well, so I've had to think a lot about this just because our closest city, Peterborough, came up with
Okay.
a tree bylaw, and um, you know, if you go through a lot of bylaws, it's the as we agree that, and that justifies the bylaw, right? So as with so the bylaw in Peterborough was that it was basically saying that canopy coverage within the community is a high priority. So anything that is detrimental or takes away from canopy coverage um, is bad, which means Manitoba maples
Hmm.
create canopy coverage. Big stinky poplars, willows, all buckthorn. That's
Yeah.
all canopy coverage, right? Now there's been amendments and stuff like that, but I don't think anybody from the city of Peterborough is watching this, so I think I'll be fine. But it was interesting to start talking to clients and saying, well, why are they telling me what to do with my tree? I said, okay, well, let's look at it this way. Do the benefits of your tree
Right.
only affect your property? Does the oxygen stay just within your property lines? Does the shade? Does the cooling factor? Does the wind? All these things. And if you plan on moving, are you going to dig up the tree with you
Right.
and take it with you? Like there is a community value
Right.
in people's trees. But the problem with that is if everybody's getting the benefit of it, it's still the property owner that's having to deal with any of the
Yeah.
costs and the risks
Yeah.
involved in that tree. So it kind of
Oh
gets
yeah.
into a bit of a heady
What do you
argument,
mean?
right?
You tell me what I can do with it, but if it becomes
And
unsafe, it's my job to pay to fix it.
well, in when people communities start telling you what you can and can't do with your tree, um, and I, a hypothetical is, um, I look at a tree, I say this tree has a high risk. I'm not saying it's dangerous or anything like that. It's a high
Right.
risk of potential failure. Um, the client isn't interested in mitigation options; they want it removed. Not saying this is a situation that's happened, but the city says no. You can put cables in the tree and you can prune it, and that's good. Okay, well, who's responsible for that tree if
Yeah.
those cables don't hold? And if that tree does fail,
Yeah.
it's still going to be the homeowner. And then the other question is are you asking or the community asking for a um, um, greater care provided for private trees than
Mm.
what they would do in public?
Yeah.
So if you go around and how many trees in your community are cabled
Yeah.
and reduction pruned? Because there's just
Yeah.
not the budget and the resources to do that stuff. So
Right.
the duty of care. So
Yeah.
there's a lot, and I love chatting about this stuff. I think it's very interesting. I have never got
No,
to
it's
an
a tough
answer
one.
yet, but that's not
It's
usually
really
my
tough when, and you're
forte.
getting back to the electrician or plumber analogy or carpenter analogy. Like there, you're dealing with innate objects and the non-living things that serve a function. And if your sewage messes up, it probably mostly just affects you. If it's not like you're gonna. Well, but electrical, it could burn a few houses down. But there's a bit of crossover. Yeah, yeah,
Well, natural
right.
gas that
Like
affects it.
trees is yeah, and that's an interesting concept. Like as long as they're helping us and they're good, then you can't touch them. But if they're causing a problem, then you got to pay to deal with it.
Well, it's like the wandering property line, right? It's like, yeah, my property line goes here, and then it darts around that 80-foot dead elm, and then it
Yeah,
comes back in the straight line again. You're like, that's
How
really
did that?
weird.
that dead one's not mine. The living ones, but the dead one's not mine.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah. What it just got me thinking. What the heck is the difference between a bylaw and a law? Anyway, a law is obviously stronger, but what the hell is a bylaw anyway? Like, what's the term mean?
I think it's because it's.
I know.
Oh, let me get
Yeah,
my lawyer hat on.
bylaw. Like it's a
I forgot it.
secondary. Maybe it's like
I
secondary
think
law.
I think bylaws are more consensus driven
Uh,
by the public, sort of like ANSI is a consensus standard, right? Whereas OSHA standards or Ministry of Health and Safety standards are more law driven, right? That would be my guess if I had to guess.
Well, I think it has to do with that bylaws are created by municipalities and regions where laws are usually provincial or
okay,
federal, at
okay.
least up here in Canada, right? Like you can't come into Buckhorn and drive 180 because we put a cardboard sign up saying that
The
we have
law
100
here
time to drive.
says.
No, we
Right.
have to take
Drive fast, take chances.
we spelled it wrong anyway. But I think it has to do with the municipal set them. They create
That could
them,
be
right?
it. Yeah, yeah. I'm the law around here.
Matt, I got to mention we were chatting. It was a while ago, a couple years, and we were talking about buying new gear for climbers and stuff. And you had a great plan, which I use to this day, and I've passed on. And I got to give you credit. So basically, you said whenever you have one of your climbers, like, hey, I need X, Y, and Z, this super new gear, and you'd be like, sure, we'll get that for you, but you got to get a book too, right? And I just thought that was an amazing way to encourage sort of that education and that looking beyond just a piece of gear, right? Um, and I will use that at the company, at the family company here today, and I tell people that all the time when I'm traveling and training. It's like, yeah, when they want new gear, say that's great. You got to get a book, and then in 4 to 6 months, I'm going to need a little report on what you learned from that book, right? All right,
Oh,
because
that's
you got to
good.
read it, all right?
Yeah. Well, everybody. It just feels like sometimes you buy a helmet and you're not really buying it to protect anything worth investing. Like put something behind the helmet, right? And really that came from um, certainly when I was working for Pavey there, he really encouraged me to kind of up my skills, not just technically, but he'd ask me, explain photosynthesis and like all these things just to kind of keep your brain working. But when I first started the business um, 18 years ago, I think it was my first employee. I was doing some um, traverses between
Hmm.
some black locusts, and um, I had a I was doing the traverse, and then it was early on when I'm not going to get into names, but there was a rope that was
Mm-hmm.
spliced on both ends,
Mm,
and the milk came into the
mm,
middle and got right on my hitch. And while I traversed, um,
mm,
it didn't grab because it was in this big, and I fell. I came out of the tree, or not out of the tree, but I came down about 12 feet. But before I did that, my ankle was caught in a tight branch union of a black locust. So my ankle went, my ankle stayed, and then my ankle came. And so I could feel my ankle starting to expand. And so I kept my boot on and I got home and everything. I took my line out and everything. And we had just started the business. We were just kind of getting off our feet and I was done. Like I was hobbling around for a couple weeks and I realized like, oh boy, if a racehorse breaks a leg, all you got is glue, and that's kind of where I was at. So I'm like, I better start doing something else to give me legs in this industry. So I started reading and got into training a lot more um, and yeah, just kind of expanded. And I have kind of pushed that with my climbers because when you get into the industry, like everybody's, how everybody is, it's like shiny stuff, the newest thing, and which is worse now than it was 20 years ago, right? The Cheryl catalog was like a pamphlet, and now it's like a phone book. If anybody knows what a phone book is,
it's a website.
But yeah, the website, yeah, okay. But everybody focuses on getting better as a climber, better as a climber, better as a climber. But they don't necessarily understand the whys behind things. And they don't understand that climbing is the shiniest part, but it's just such a small part of the industry. And there's so much more. And if all you're doing is climbing, there's a few people out there that they can climb well into, their 60s or whatever. Not me. I know I'm not going to do that. And I don't really want to do that. I like climbing still, but I can't depend on it. So yeah, there's some of my books. We've just moved our offices and stuff like that. So, but it's funny because originally my books were books about like on rope rigging techniques, different climbing techniques, and then it got more into mushrooms and things like that. And then I got into decay, and I got a lot into risk assessment, which that's the stuff I really love. I love talking like risk assessment and everything. And then once I started moving the business more, now all my books are about management and leadership and how to deal with people and how to talk to people and communicate, how to create systems. It's been like this big change up where it's interesting. I had a advisory board with the company, Tracy and I, because when you run the business, you don't really have to answer to. You got to answer to your clients and your employees, but there's nobody really kind of saying, "Nah, don't do that." So we got an advisory board, and I was interviewing somebody for it to see if they were interested, and he just said, "You know what? The most important thing for you right now is going to be figuring out how to manage your time." Because it's not like you go on a job and you know how long this job is going to be. It's that you don't have those constraints of get in the truck, then go and climb a tree and all this stuff. And then he said the other thing is the amount of time and effort that you spent becoming a proficient arborist, a proficient climber, you have to spend that same amount of energy learning on how to lead people and work with people and communicate with people. And I didn't really take that to heart until a couple of years ago. We had a big kind of upset with the company as far with employees and things like that. And that was a big wake up that, oh yeah, I really have to figure out how I'm dealing with people and communicating with them.
Yeah. Well, your new
Still
boss,
learning.
I think one of your new bosses, I should say, was often would say, and he probably still does, that your quality of life is directly connected to your ability to communicate. Scott would say that a lot. I don't know if he'd heard it somewhere, but when you talk with him next, you can remind him of that. And I'm sure he still believes it to be true. He would say it all the time. You know, your quality of life is directly connected to your ability to communicate, which is quite a profound statement, really. And yeah, I think lots of lessons myself to learn in that. You know, the one thing I was thinking about while you're talking about all that, Matt, is the value of being in the present moment as well. You know, like being present and active in what it is you're doing in that moment at that time. You know, whether, you know, like you're climbing now and focus and be good at that. Now you're with a customer and you're talking about the tree, and that's your, you know, being in that moment. Or then you're talking to your crew, right? And you're communicating about the job and not thinking about, you know, the list of estimates you got to do, but being that's it's not necessarily that easy. You know, I at least I've found for myself, and the better I'm able to do that, you know, and the oddest thing is, you know, the simplest meditation that one of the first Buddhists they talk about is the in and out of breath, like noticing your in breath, pausing, and then noticing your out breath. You know, like it's pretty key. Like you can't really do anything without without that, right? And it's happening subconsciously. But if you bring your consciousness to that, it really focuses you in, right? And you know, just being in the present of moment of whatever it is you're doing, you know, and as a climber, obviously that's pretty important, like for safety's sake, especially, right? But that those moments shift from moment to moment, and what you focus on changes. But you know, and then it evolves as you age, right? Like a tree. Which, well, you're all the other thing that I was thinking about while you're talking with your books, and you know, you're maturing, you're changing. I don't know at what point we start retrenching, right? But at some point, yeah, you did right. You know, like things
Soon.
change, and you know, really interesting perspective too on the climbing thing. Like, you know, there was a long time I really felt like I was less than because I wasn't keeping up to the level of counterparts. Like there's a couple guys that still compete that I competed with, but there's only I think two. And you know, and they're exceptional and they're quite admired and they're quite well known. But I'm, you know, I've become okay, and I've made the decision not to be that, and it's okay. I do other things, but I just not doing that, right?
Yeah, it's tough though, because like I know I attached
Right,
my identity to being
right,
an arborist and to be a climber, and in like when you know your shoulders start to break down and your arms start to break down, and
yeah,
lifting that 6'6" up isn't doing the way, and those limb walks start getting a little long and stuff like that, you know, that's tough. And then, you know, that gives you a challenge. A couple of weeks ago, because the
yeah,
our merger, so we're now a division of
yeah,
Bartlett, um, but I'm moving into a different role. So I'm still going to be
yeah,
climbing, but in a trainer role and a mentorship role. But we had some big pine removals to do, in close proximity to a building, and just the way the scheduling worked, my number one climber wasn't able to do it. So I said, "Well, I'll do it." So I got up there, and you know, it's beautiful. Um, well, it would have been February still, and right on the lake, and I'm ripping down this pine. We had transfer line, and then with a tag to slow it down, and then triangulating, and it was great. It was awesome, and I had this moment that I got up at the top, and I just kind of stopped. I'm like, man, I'm
yeah.
gonna miss this, you know. And then the next morning, when I was like, oh, I'm trying to get out of bed. I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna miss it.
Yeah.
But you do attach so much to that thing that you've worked so hard to do and work on and perfect and hone, and then for that to be uh not there. And unfortunately, like, this is my decision. I can only imagine people that get injured and they got
Mm.
to hang it up for good. Like, that's got to be a real kick in the pants. Like, there's some real
Yeah.
trauma,
Well,
um,
I
because it takes a certain type of person to really
for me, I make it
be a
what
certain
you're
type of
talking
man.
about now really draws my attention to the concept of attachment. And you said it a couple times, and like you I've learned now in later years, like the stronger your attachment is, the more difficult your transitions will be, because nothing lasts forever, right? And we talked about being in the moment and moment to moment, and you have to be able to detach from one to the next. And and as I transitioning into sort of retirement here, of whatever that is, but it takes a very conscious effort to choose, to say, look, this is the reality. This is like, you can live in denial, of course, and say, I could still do those removals. I could do all that. And you probably could, but it would really hurt. And you wouldn't be having fun anymore. And you probably become dangerous, grumpy, and pissy, right? Itchy, bitchy, and twitchy. But if you're able to,
I'm already 2 out of 3,
if
so
you're able and it takes a real, I found, a conscious effort to transition. And and you're transitioning now, you're gonna, maybe this is, maybe you could take this as some advice for whatever it's worth. I'll just throw it out there, but you got to make decisions to let go of, and to observe it, and to move in a new capacity, a new way of operating. Like I think of, in your case, transitioning from an owner operator to now being part of a large company, and having bosses, like you said, now I got bosses, right? Like, and observing that for what it is, and accepting it, and learning from it as you go, and not being attached to the way it used to be. And that applies to climbing. That applies to, at some point, there will come a day where you can't, maybe walk, I don't know what, maybe it's 95, maybe it's 98, but every one of those things requires, there's a way to do it with grace, or there's a way to be forced into it. And it's going to happen one way or another, right? So we can choose how those transitions, and it has a lot to do with our attachments. And the stronger the attachments, the more difficult they are, and the less, it really can impede your joy or your happiness, if you're too attached. And kids that way, as they, I think of DJ when he was, looking like he may end up in a pro sport, in football, and then him making the decision to leave that. Like, I was I had a strong attachment to what he might do, and I think it was harder for me to go through that than him, and that was one of my first examples where I really started experiencing that and realizing, holy shit, like, I've got attachment issues here, and I got a long way to go, but I don't know, Tony, what do you think? You got the philosophy degree.
Oh yeah, you have to. I think the concept of reinventing yourself is gonna, it has to happen because you grow and you evolve. Like you said, Matt, your book selection changed through the years, and I think part of that is you build a foundation, right? Like, I don't need to read about carabiners and blocks anymore, because I have a pretty good base of knowledge with not that I can learn more. I always can, but I have a frame of reference there. And then, my job duties have changed, but I've had to reinvent myself 2 or 3 times in the course of my life. The most recently was when I just didn't want to do production work anymore. I just didn't want to do it. It just wasn't that exciting. And I'm like, I know the downward spiral. I'd seen it, many times over. What a physical job like this can do to you. So I had to reinvent myself. And then even more recently, like in the last 5 years, I've had to kind of reinvent myself as a trainer, because as a trainer, I'm tired of talking about the shiny things, right? I'm done. Like, I've said everything that I want to say about a carabiner and a climbing hitch, to simplify it. Now I want to talk about other things like leadership or taking care of yourself or making good decisions. Because, when I look at the family company now, it's like when we have problems at the family company, it's very rarely arboriculture related. It's always logistics, right? It's always the guys and girls go out and doing tree work. They're really good at that. And we do a good job of developing them and training them. And not that mistakes don't happen, but we do a really good job. Where we run into problems is trucks break down or equipment doesn't get to the job site or things run over. So what I tell people that are starting tree businesses now is like, you have to focus on the arboriculture, but you better get really good at logistics too, right? Because the biggest challenge is just getting the right people and the equipment in the place to get the work done on time, right? So I've had to reinvent myself as a trainer and what I want to speak about and train about and what the message that I want to put out there, because I've built a bit of a platform, where I can go to a conference and do a talk on leadership. I can go to a conference and do a talk on how philosophy can influence your life, and how you can make better decisions. And it's an important skill. It's not something that I don't think I'm that great at it, but I'm getting a lot of practice, I think.
Yeah, it's I'm really interested to get back into the training gig, because there's always this push and pull when you're trying to train in your own company, right? And um and I think the benefit of me moving into what I'm doing now is it it gives me not an end, but the next step of what to do with all this accumulated knowledge. Like I now get to give it away. I get, hopefully, the walls that I bash my head on, other people don't need to, because I can put that forward and really, and I think this speaks a lot to kind of the relationship I've had with you guys, is to be in the realm of service for others, right? And really, Tony said it the absolute best on a beach in Mexico. It's never fucking about you.
Yeah.
it's always about somebody else. And that's something that I keep in mind, and it's something that I have to bring to a lot of my conversations and my thoughts is, okay, are these decisions, or is this conversation, or this objective based on what I need and what I want, or is it what they need? Um, and how can I help someone else? And I think I'm much more ready for that than I was even when I first started training. I think when I first started training, um, it was very much ego based, about that I'm a trainer, which means that I know more than everybody else in this room, and that's why you're listening to me. And that was an insecurity on my behalf. And it's now, I'm not. I have my stories and my experiences, and the experiences of others and the knowledge of others through asking questions and being humble and admitting my shortcomings, that I'm now able to take all that and present it much more confidently.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's going to make my transition easier, is I have an outlet for this. Like, it would be so much worse that if I didn't have anywhere to go after this, and I just had all this stuff, and I didn't have a way to get rid of it. Not get rid of it, but
there's a saying, you only
it,
keep what you have by giving it away. Right. And service, and the concept of helping others, there's a tremendous value in it and power in it that's not I don't know what the word is. I guess you could use its word spiritual or whatever, but it's not, you know, it transcends the monetary compensation for it. Even, in fact, even if that's, you know, that's not, I mean, you know, we need to make a living, right? And we're compensated for time often, but when you're sharing and helping, there's a different, there's more than just a transaction. It's more, less, you know, interestingly enough, like tree care for us, right? Like it wasn't just for the money. Like you said, the trees didn't pay it, but you cared about the trees. You loved doing the tree work, but you also were, you know, and it training's like that. I just realized there's a pretty close connection there.
I mean, it is like being a trainer is definitely a service that you're passing on, but I get a great deal of professional and personal satisfaction out of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I like that feeling of standing up in front of people and sharing that knowledge and seeing that return. I tell people that, I have a degree in philosophy because I love to learn, and the best way for me to learn is to teach, and that there's that. But I think, like you, Matt, I think early on in my training career, I enjoyed giving people a fish, which was important. You need fish if you're going to eat dinner, and for fish for dinner. I like to think now that I'm trying more to teach them how to fish, right? The old saying, give someone a fish and you fed them, teach them how to fish, and they can feed a bunch of people. So, and that's just the way that I've tried to reinvent myself in what I do with work. And I think, it's a natural evolution of it all. And that's where I drive I had to make those changes because giving people fish wasn't satisfying for me anymore. I wanted to do more, so I think that's where it came from. And I don't know if I'm good at it or not, but I'm done throwing fish. Now I'm throwing fishing rods.
Yeah, teach them how to build rods and lures. Man, you mentioned about your transition a couple times. Maybe we could just spend a bit of time talking about that journey. And for those listening that maybe have their own business or wonder what the future holds, like how it came to be, where you're at with that. I know it's just in the beginning, but if you're willing, that's because it's a big step, and it's a transition.
Yeah. So um, my wife and I, Tracy, we started Logan Tree Experts 18 years ago, and it was very much started. I don't want to say spite, but that was the first that came up. Um, I'd worked for a really fantastic company um, up in Dwight, which is north of me, for a gentleman, Phil Pavey, who is a good friend and a mentor for me. Um, and I saw how you can treat employees. I saw how you can treat your clients. I saw how you could think outside of the box. But at the time, my then girlfriend, now wife, we wanted to move closer to our one of our families. So I came back home, and I couldn't fit in with kind of the culture that I saw around here. I wasn't mixing well, so I said, you know what? Why don't we just start a business ourselves? And it it was a monster that grew fast and got hungry, and we were constantly feeding that monster. And I've had some um, fantastic experiences. I've had some amazing clients, amazing employees. Um, it was a small business, so it was tough. It had its ups and downs. It had a lot of the days didn't end when we got to the
Yeah.
kitchen table. you know, a lot of those conversations kept going, and I could not have run it with anybody other than my wife. Um, and over the last couple of years, we were looking for opportunities. Selling the business was always something that we wanted to do, so we always tried to build the business so it was more attractive to sell. Um, so I was kind of always trying to take care of the clients. trying to take care of the crews. Tracy was always working behind the scenes, making sure we had good systems set up. We were nice and organized. And it just kind of came to a point last year where I said, I think we might want to, let's reach out and see. And we made some contact, fortunately, through my numerous associations, through the training that I've done and my time with ISA Ontario. I have lots of different connections, so I know lots of people. I started some conversations, and it moved pretty fast. And through that process, which can be dragged along, I was very lucky to have a good friend of mine that helped us kind of negotiate it. He's like, "You take care of the business, I'll take care of the sale." So I kept working, and then the opportunity arose where there was a regional trainer position that they were hoping to fill in Ontario, and they asked if I was interested, and that's something that I've always been interested in, getting back with training. And it was also something that I kind of said earlier, is it's hard to train and try to run production, and especially if you're the one who sold the work too, because it's like you have too much information in your head, and you're like, this is a great opportunity to teach this, but I also know how many hours we have on this, and and you're like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and somebody else in there. So we were putting up systems to try to alleviate that or change that by creating a mentorship program, and I was really trying to focus on how to build the crew up. And this kind of took that production hat off, and now it just left me with the training portion. And I felt like, yeah, this is something that I can do and I can assist with, and I'm hoping that I can bring some new ideas to it. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at right now. I'm actually heading out today. I'll be traveling across Ontario, visiting some of our branches and just kind of introducing myself. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
Well, congratulations, and I think it's a good move. And look, I know you had a passion for it. I know we enjoyed it when you were with us, and I know I understand the challenge of trying to do too many things at once, and I'm excited for you to be able to get back into the training saddle, so to speak, and maybe we can have some more interactions as a result of that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Any chance to catch up with you guys, I appreciate it.